And we're back. This is Colombia Calling, episode 474. Yes, we're here in Bogota. My very special guest this week is Erwin Liz. Now, if you haven't listened back to the Colombia Calling podcast back in, older episodes, Erwin has been on several times. We've discussed everything from his coffee, coming from the Cauca region, Terra Dentro. We've discussed his scholarships to the US. We also discussed when there was blockades down in the southwest of the country. We've talked about everything. And now I'm getting Erwin back on here because we need to talk not just coffee, obviously. Coffee's great. But I'd like to hear from, let's say, the other side of the story when we think about the rescue of the 4 children from the jungles in Guaviare. Erwin is of the NASA people, and I just thought maybe it's time to hear more from the other side. So, well, Erwin, first and foremost, welcome back on the Colombia Calling podcast.
Thank you so much, Richard.
No, it's always a pleasure to have you on. You've always you're always very happy. You're always very informed. And so I just like having a chat and catching up. And first, let's talk about your coffee project. Native Root is going from strength to strength. I know that you're exporting and selling within Colombia. So tell us a little bit about it. Do some publicity for your company.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. So yeah, we're an indigenous company, and we're also a family company that is mainly made up of women. It's 4 women versus 3 men. So basically, my 3 sisters, my mom, and then my brother and my dad. That's the composition of the company. And what we have been doing since 2017 is we have been working with the coffee that we grow at our own farm, but then also the coffee that is grown by our neighbors. And the whole mission of the company is basically bringing the best of the coffee that is grown in the region, paying the farmers better prices for their coffee, and then bringing it to customers here in Colombia and customers outside of the country. We're mainly going to the US, to Canada, and some of it also goes to Italy. But we also have a lot of consumers here internally, which we're very happy about because, as we all know, for a very long time, Colombians used to drink really, really bad coffee, and so we're in that kind of fight to convince more Colombians to drink good coffee. And so it's been quite an honor to be part of this process, because today, compared to even just a couple years, people know a little bit more about specialty coffee. People know a little bit more about grinding their own beans and also knowing about the origin and traceability and all that kind of stuff. So we're very happy to be part of that moment, I guess, towards just drinking one of the products that characterizes Colombia in the world, which is coffee, really good coffee. So yeah, it's been quite an interesting journey, and it's going great so far, and we have just kept on growing.
I think it's great because I remember, when we first spoke, I lived 3 houses ago and stuff, and you were growing, and it had a different name and everything else. But the rebranding a few years ago, and it just looks like, when I see your posts on Facebook and elsewhere, it just looks like you're growing and growing and growing. So I think the next stop, there'll be a Native Root cafe somewhere in Bogota before long. I think so. But let's congratulate Erwin on his success, of course, his family business. And where can we find your coffee? Nativeroot.com, is that it?
Yes, that's the place where people can go and buy it. We have a website, and there is a shop in there where you can buy it online. But also we take a lot of orders via WhatsApp, which the link is also available on the website. If you are more of a person who likes to communicate directly with us, and so we can take the orders either way. And of course, shipping nationwide and also to many other countries. Just make sure to ask us.
Excellent. It's so cool. It's so great to see these success stories that come up, and how we can accompany Erwin and his projects and business for so many years, and see how well it's doing. But Erwin, the reason why we want to talk more than the coffee, of course, is this story, which is still very much in the news. last Saturday, I guess it was, or last Saturday.
Yeah.
The 4 children that had been lost in the jungle after this tragic air accident. Their Cessna went down into the jungle canopy, and all adults were killed who were on the plane. 4 days later, the mother who was traveling with them succumbed to her injuries and died. The 4 children then survived 40 days in the jungles of Guaviare in parts of Colombia where you can't see more than 20 meters visibility because the jungle is so dense. And there was a huge rescue location effort, hundreds of people involved, all split up into teams. And yes, last Saturday they were found and airlifted out, and then after getting to San Jose del Guaviare, then taken to Bogota, where they remain at this moment in the military hospital under watch because they suffered from severe dehydration, insect bites, and I guess malnutrition as well, and of course the trauma of having gone through all of this. But we hear a lot about the sort of side that I'm talking about. We hear a lot of this from, I would say, a Northern European or Western style, but I thought it was time that we should hear more from, let's say, an indigenous perspective, and this is where Ervin comes in. So let's start with the very basics, Ervin. When you first heard 40 days ago, when the plane went missing and went down, we knew there was an air crash. What is your reaction to this? It's like, okay, 4 very young indigenous Huitoto children in the jungle, that's ages 13, 9, 4, and 1. What is your reaction to this? I mean, what do you think? Is it's do you put yourself in a similar situation? Do you know of other stories similar to this? Just give us a little bit of maybe some ideas.
Yeah, so when I first heard about it, well, initially I didn't know much about the story until I actually started reading about it, and my first impression was, of course, this is gonna be a very tough situation. And to be honest, I wasn't very I guess positive about the outcome afterwards, and especially because of the age, these are very young kids, and just I used to think about my dad also had a farm down in Putumayo at some point. And so I remember this one time where he went out with my mom, and a jaguar followed them. They were not very far away from the farmhouse, and a jaguar followed them, and nothing happened, but in the jungle there is every kind of danger. And while we did grow up in a very remote area in Cauca, our area is not nearly, I guess, as jungle like as the regions in Caqueta, in Putumayo. And so I did understand that these were very different conditions. And so taking that into consideration, I wasn't very positive about what would happen. Not because not because I guess the children couldn't figure something out, because we as indigenous peoples, we do grow up basically understanding and knowing everything there is to know about the surroundings and the context in which we grow. Like just in my case, when I was a kid, my parents, even without teaching us, we used to ride horses from the very beginning. We used to know how to go up in the mountains and get fruits and get food, and that's basically the context where we grew up, and we used to play on trees. And so you learn how to climb, you learn how to get food from the forest, you learn how to get fruits, and you also get to this you get to learn to distinguish between good food, good fruits, and fruits that might not be good for us as humans. And so I wasn't I guess doubting their ability to do that, but my main concern was the animals out there that could potentially harm them. And there is a great many of them. I mean, this forest are they have also pumas, mountain lion, there is jaguars, there is even herbivores could be potentially dangerous, against children, especially at that age. And so, taking that into consideration, I was very, I guess, proud and very just surprised at their strength, and also the care for the older sister, for the children. And that also brought into mind the way we grow up in the community, which is always, the eldest ones start taking always care of the younger ones from very, very early age. In the case of, we are five siblings, so my eldest sister, and we are only 10 years apart from the oldest to the youngest, which is me. And so, when by the time I was born, she was only 10 years old, my eldest sister, and she was basically as a mom to me, because my parents will go out there to the farm to take care of business, while the siblings will stay at home. And so they had to learn to take care of each other. When you go to an indigenous community, you're going to see very, very young kids, men and women, yeah, boys and girls, carrying other children that are almost half their size. So you will see this very frequently, and that basically is how we grow up, learning to take care of each other. And so I guess all of those abilities definitely played a crucial role in the outcome of this story. So again, I was very happy to see the outcome at the end, but initially I was just like, I guess, very scared and not very positive about what would happen in that context, especially since I had been in that context before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those things where as soon as they got to like 30 days, I was like, this can't go on.
Right.
This can't go on. But like you were saying, your upbringing is in the nature. And as you said, again, your siblings are raising you. So there is already that added responsibility and understanding of the family and the family unit. And of course, I would say authority. The oldest one is the one who's saying and carrying and doing. And like in this case, I guess the 13-year-old is Leslie, and she knew what she was doing. But like also, as you say, you grew up in the nature, knowing almost implicitly, I think, about the fruits and the seeds. And I guess this is one of the things that we kind of sort of fell back on when we thought about the four Mucutuy children, that's the surname, there in the Guaviare. Is like, obviously the 4-year-old and the 1-year-old will not be as or nothing at all, but the 13-year-old and the 9-year-old have to know more, have to know about this. So I find that obviously that was a great source of relief when we sort of think of the time they spent in the jungle and so. But I would like to ask, there's a few things that I've said as well on the international media, and I think a lot of my friends also here in Colombia have said the way that this search was conducted to include the indigenous communities really it's kind of pioneering. That a few years ago, I don't think that would have happened. It would just be a military operation, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I was also very surprised about that, because yeah, I guess since we know about cases like this, there is always the involvement of other kind of authorities, not necessarily the indigenous communities. And so I guess in this case, this was a major shift, I guess, in the sharing of responsibility with the communities, which I will say it was a very wise decision to make, given that it was the indigenous peoples who found the kids. It wasn't directly the army. I mean, the army was definitely a very important player in the whole matter, but it was actually the Guardia Indígena who found the kids. What I did not like very much was that, in the official pictures, it was mainly just soldiers there taking care of the children, when the true story was that, it was the indigenous guardia who found them and then gave them to the army. But I guess that's mainly just kind of politics, I will say, or I don't know. In any case, if it hadn't been, for their presence, it might have taken longer. Or I don't know. I don't know what would have happened, but definitely, I was very grateful in a way to see that. Also when I was listening to the interview, I think it was on Canal Capital, when they were interviewing the Guardia, and then was it sergeant, or the army personnel who was in charge of the search and rescue. He was very, I guess, respectful of the ways of the indigenous people, and also he was grateful for them, having accompanied the whole process. And just seeing that also makes me feel very happy and proud, because this person did seem to truthfully value that ancient knowledge, and that comes from the indigenous communities, and of course the work that they did in the whole process. So I don't know how everybody else feels, but just seeing that person in authority, say the things that he was saying, and he started with the Guardia Indígena Salud, which was really good as well. So I was very happy to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a definite change. It's a definite change from when there were sort of paros in the south, how the military would address the indigenous communities, or even the campesinos, the farmers. There has been a definite shift. That's the word you used, and we could see that. And the language used by, as you said, that the soldier in charge was one very much of humanitarian beliefs and projects, and that was different. These guys did not sound like warriors anymore, which is
Right.
it was really quite refreshing, and to see that, and hearing it from your perspective as well, to actually even make you feel proud that a soldier does the Guardia Indígena salute, and yep. It's just a big deal, because I've been to Araraquara more than 10 years ago down there, so where the Mucutuy family are from, or nearby, and the relationship all these years ago between the Huitoto and the military was never great. I mean, there was a suspicion from both sides, and it's the obvious suspicion. If you're just trying to survive, so therefore, you obviously, if you, let's say the guerrilla comes through and you let them come through, so the military think you're a guerrilla sympathizer, and then the military comes through and you let them come through your land as well, and they take some food, then the guerrillas think you're a military sympathizer, and so you can't win. And so I feel that there's always been the suspicion. Can you confirm this a bit about the relationship between the military and communities?
Yeah, I mean that relationship, I guess, is the same throughout the whole country with indigenous communities. I mean, it's happening in Caucasus, so many times, where the communities have been judged by both sides to be, helping both sides, and so it definitely makes things very, very complicated. And there has been a quite a complicated relationship with many tribes, where even in Cauca, this one time when the indigenous community basically carried out the soldiers from their base where they were staying, they literally lift them up and took them out of there. I mean, situations like that have happened, and so it's been very difficult from both sides, just because there has never been any level of I guess actual human communication, heart-to-heart communication. It's always been mainly about what the either side wants to do, and not really think about the community or include the community in the processes. And so I guess seeing this new perspective definitely makes me hope for the best. I really hope that that this might be the beginning of a long-lasting relationship, where actually the authority also of the indigenous guard can also be taken into consideration in matters of this sort, of the humanitarian sort. So I definitely, yeah, I'm definitely very, very happy see that, and glad that they could come to an understanding, that this was a humanitarian matter and that they needed to work together, just compared to what would have happened in the past, or the experience that we have lived in the past.
Yeah, this now new spirit of cooperation is only a good thing. It's only a
Yes.
good thing. It's a humanitarian thing. I wanted to ask as well, because when I think of, the military man, or whoever said it, he said, this is not, looking for these 4 children is not a needle in a haystack, it's a flea in a rug. And because the children keep moving, and they're eventually found around 5 kilometers from where they crashed. But again, 5 kilometers in that jungle is, 5 kilometers seems like nothing, but 5 kilometers in that jungle is a huge distance, and for the 4 children. But I get the impression, and I think these sort of reports are coming out, that when the children perhaps heard soldiers or heard the helicopters or the search, they hid. And because they've got this fear of the formal authorities in this situation. I think they did, didn't they? They actually had if you hear dogs barking, you think of it as a threat, and if you hear a helicopter flying overhead, you probably think it's a military operation. What do you say to that?
Yes, I will most definitely say that, that's a very realistic scenario. And also, just thinking about myself, I mean, I used to be scared to death when I was a kid, when I used to see the soldiers, because back then in Cauca, we didn't have roads, and so they will always, like in that region, we didn't have roads, so they would walk up the trails, and then they will pass by our houses. And we were never used to seeing that many men so fully armed with so many weapons. And it used to be a very, very scary situation. I never knew that that they were soldiers or that they were guerrilla. I just knew that there was a bunch of men going with their guns and doing their own thing. So I used to be very, very scared about that situation. And so I will say, when we grew up in that context, being so isolated from everything, and then suddenly you see people that are just weapons to the teeth, then you definitely get very scared, no matter from which side they come. And so I will say, I don't know that it will be it may be good to confirm with them, but if it had been me in that situation back then, I would have definitely been very scared about that, because I used to be very scared of the soldiers when I used to see them.
Hey,
Actually,
I'm still scared.
that fear only went away like later on, when I actually kind of became more aware of the situation. But up until like 14, 15, I used to be very scared of anybody who used to go by with weapons.
And you didn't distinguish who they were,
No.
army or guerrilla.
Yeah.
It's just people. These are people
Yeah.
with guns.
People with guns, exactly. Yeah,
Exactly.
because it's not the nature in the community. People in the community are not armed. They are not walking around with weapons on their shoulders. So it's very scary.
Definitely. I know. You can see. And so tell us now. It's a good time to move on to because we did fall back on this a few times in interviews with the mainstream press in England and elsewhere. It's the saberes ancestrales. And so if we talk about the ancestral knowledge that the indigenous people possess when it comes to, let's say, Mother Earth and the jungle, maybe you can give us a bit more of a summary of how to explain this.
Yes, so that is a very wide context, and every tribe, every community understands it, in a different manner. But basically, I will say, we grow up understanding that that nature, that Earth is our mother, and in that context, there is all these sorts of spirits that are there, that can be there to do good or to do evil. And that ability is mainly it's mainly I guess guided or affected by humans. It's not the spirit in itself. It's not like the spirit is, I guess it's not that the spirit is evil, it's more that the spirit can be used for both purposes, to do good or to do bad depending on the people. Right, that's what we grew up learning. And my grandfather, he was a shaman, so he used to speak about this quite frequently. And so just like one quick story, that I mean, he, in the places where there is water, he would say that there was small spirits that if they were happy, they will let you take the drink, but if they were unhappy because you had done something bad, then they might actually make that water harm you. You might get a stomach ache, you might get a headache from that. And so it's the same spirit that is there to do good, that can do good or can do bad depending on the situation. And with children, since we believe that the children are the most I guess innocent of them all. I mean, in this context, depending on also on their own spirituality, it might have been a key factor to allow them to stay alive in a context where there is so many dangers. So again, I will say that that spirituality is also very personal, but we are very aware that the spirits are out there, whether you like it or not. They can actually they can actually affect you, even if you believe in them or not. They can actually affect you. And if you have your own faith in the spirits, then they might actually even do more for you than if you did not believe. So again, I do not know their context. I do not know what kind of beliefs they hold. um but in general, what I have heard from the people saying, the indigenous peoples, is that definitely, since there was a lot of rituals being made from the outside, from people who were also expecting the kids to be alive, that might have had an effect on them, being able to stay alive. And that's how it's always been in the communities. When the person who is having the situation cannot do anything about it, somebody else will act on their behalf. And that was the case, just as a story to tell. In my case, when my mom was about to give birth to me, I could not go down because I was in the wrong position. And so my grandfather, who was a shaman, he basically started doing kind of like a remote session, like a remote healing session, where he will touch his stomach as if he was the one who was pregnant, trying to shift me into the right position. And then when he said that I was ready to be given birth, I was actually born. And that's a very true story as to how I came to this world. And so things like that can happen. And I know that there was a lot of people doing rituals on the outside, on behalf of the children. So even if they might not have had the beliefs themselves, the what was happening on the outside definitely had an impact, I will say. And that's probably the reason why they are alive.
And in that connection between people, nature, actions, and of course then nature being the spirit world as well, everything being the spirit world. And that story you tell about your mother in childbirth with you is very powerful indeed.
Yes.
Your grandfather, a shaman, making the motions on his stomach as if he had the womb and so on. That's very powerful indeed. And I think that obviously the oldest child at 13 would have had more knowledge of the spirits and of the beliefs, and would have been able to impart them to her brothers and sister. I think she would have been able to have done that, definitely. And I know, as you were mentioning, the efforts and the ceremonies taking place outside. So I know that there were a lot of the, I guess, taitas and shaman talking about having communicated with the children via jahe, no, or ayahuasca to those of you in other parts of South America, but jahe. Have you heard about that as well? The use of yahe to communicate through, so let's say, the I don't know, parallel universes.
Yes, it's definitely a plant that can be used for that purpose. And it also depends on the kind of shamans that that are doing the ritual. In the case of us, the Nasa people, because we're from the mountain, we do not have that plant. But we did go into this sort of like trance states, and it also depends very much on the level of I guess relationship that the shaman has with the spirit world. My grandfather used to say that he did not need that kind of products to be able to enter into that state, because in his case he actually learned by going to a lake, and then in the lake at night he will see the spirits talking to him without having to go into like a trance state. And so it really depends on the culture, on the culture that is doing it. I know that in the Amazon basin, they mainly use that plant to go into the trance state. Is just different ways to go about it. For us, coca leaves are generally enough, and also tobacco leaves, which kind of also alterate your consciousness if you have a lot of it. And so for us it's a little bit different, but definitely they are tools that are used for the spiritual purposes.
I wanted to go back as when I thought about, I was just thinking about again the photos that were taken when the first sort of rescue photos that came out, and it was all the soldiers with the children. And it's all this kind of, it's a kind of marketing, isn't it? It's a kind of I don't understand the need to do that. I don't understand the need to do that. They were all working together.
Right.
Perhaps, I mean, do you I mean, do you feel that always the traditional and the ancient communities have been pushed to one side in all of these sorts of things? Is this something that happens too frequently?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that definitely happens all the time, actually. And in this case, that's why I mentioned it, that I was very sad to see that in a way, because the work was shared, and yet who if somebody from the outside who has not heard that it was actually the Guardia Indígena who found them, somebody will say, oh, it was the army. And that's what, if you go onto Twitter, many Colombians are, we're saying it, it was the army, thank you to the army, and so forth. And that's fine, because again, it was a shared work, but it was actually the Guardia Indígena who found them. And so I will I will say there should have been a little bit more visibility in that sense, for the community in the media, and there wasn't. So that's a little bit unfortunate, especially on like the how do you say that, when the news just came out. Because afterwards then there were all of these interviews, but when the news just came out, the picture that was used did not quite include the indigenous community in there, which was a little bit sad.
It's a bit sad. It's a bit sad. But I have to say, this government that we have now, I mean, you can love it or you can hate it, and it seems to be very, very split down the middle right now. But to have included the indigenous communities in the search parties, and also, I mean, what was the event that took place in the Plaza de Bolivar not too long ago, and the Guardia Indígena was there? Was that a Minga? Was it was the demonstration, and the Guardia Indígena came to make sure it was all, everything was okay?
Yeah, basically there was a march. Not it, that wasn't a protest, I guess. It was, they were mainly like marching to support the structural changes that Pedro is trying to make. And so they were there to support the people who was marching in support of that. And yeah, a lot of indigenous guards did came from Cauca, to kind of oversee what was going on, and also to support the process.
Because what I like about that, and I mean, if you, again, you go onto Twitter, where I've always said it's where the hatred lives, but the people who get out there and start saying, these criminals, and they're up there, and what are they doing? But for me, the visibility of the Guardia Indígena is a positive thing. It's an inclusion of a very important, sector of Colombian population. Previous to that, it would just have been like ESMAD, so the riot police or the police or something else. Why can't, again, the original ancient practices be kept in use? That's my thing. And so to see that there, let's say the indigenous communities come up to not really even a protest. It was a sort of like, it's just like a march, isn't it? It's just like a demonstration of support.
Yeah.
But to have the indigenous guard there is like, we will look after ourselves. I like that. I like the visibility. But wow, the reaction by some sectors of society was it was outrageous. But anyway, we digress a bit. I think the main story is really, isn't it? It's how amazing the reality is that these 4 children survived. How amazing it is that all four brought out of the jungle. They're now in Bogota being cared for. It was spectacular, but we must not diminish the role that the indigenous communities had in this whole process. And I think, again, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I don't think the indigenous communities would have been consulted by the government in power at that time.
Yeah, I will definitely say that would not be the case. And so to be honest, I do not know the context as to who decided to include the indigenous community in the process. I don't know if it was the indigenous communities who I guess offered the help, or if they were asked to help. In the case, especially in the case of the Guardia from Cauca, because I know that the Guardia from the area where the accident happened, I mean, they did started doing the process from the very beginning, basically because it's a humanitarian matter. But then afterwards, a little bit over 40 guardias from Cauca flew into the region and started also looking for the children over there. So I am not informed as to that particular case, but yeah, it would be interesting to see who exactly was who decided to include them, or if they offered the help. In any case, I was very happy to see that they were allowed to be a part of it, because yeah, again, as you said, I don't think a couple years ago it would have been the case. So most definitely this is a very good step in the right direction.
So some of the Guardia, as you said, some of the indigenous guard came from Cauca. Do you know any of them?
Yes, I do know a few of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And have you spoken to them since?
No, I have not. I have not spoken to them.
It'd be lovely to know what the experience, lovely to know how,
True.
Because again, Cauca to Guaviare is very different.
It's very different. Yes. Yeah. The context is definitely not the same. We have forests, we have big forests, but we have mainly temperate forest, while, in that region is very hot and very humid.
Yeah, definitely. Erwin, thank you so much for sharing this point of view that it's, is all too sadly overlooked on too often occasions. But thank you for being able to share with us, some knowledge and, of course, the understanding of what saberes ancestrales are, the ancient knowledge that comes within, I would say, the very being of the indigenous community, especially when it comes to nature and the spirits and let's say, the ambience of these places. And I think you've put it into context for us. I know that my listeners who have been following this, because it's been a global story, I don't think there was any newspaper in the world that didn't have it on the front page that next day. But so let's just move on quickly and we'll end this, but say, buy Erwin's coffee, nativeroot.com. So much of the money goes back into the community, isn't it? It's a high percentage goes back in to help build schools and homes and so on.
That's right. That's something that we have been doing since the very beginning, and even since before that. I mean, in my community, in my family, we have always try to fundraise to bring different kinds of aid to the community. We have been able to definitely build houses for elderly people. We have brought food clothing and so forth. In the case of the coffee specifically, what we are doing as of now is right now the coffee prices have gone down significantly. So we have set a floor price in this case that is about almost 50% above the value of the market as of now. And when that is not the case, when the price is high, then we pay generally between 12 and 25% above market value. That's what we do for the community, since they are producing really, really good coffee, and we have been able to basically internalize all of our processes and not depend on third party providers. So that's definitely the work. nativerootcoffee.com. You can find us, and also everywhere on social media as Native Root Coffee.
Excellent. Erwin, thank you so much for your time and knowledge. And everyone out there, I buy it when I go overseas, and it's presents for everyone. So that's just a little idea for you. And Father's Day coming up, everyone. So buy coffee for, that significant man in the household. Everybody loves coffee. This is great coffee. So think of this as perhaps a gift for, the father in your family. Anyway, Erwin, Liz, thank you so much for your time. It has been really insightful and an honor to speak about, let's say, a bit more of the indigenous culture, the communities, the ancient communities here within Colombia. So we'll sign off of this episode 474 of the Colombia Calling podcast. Thank you to everyone for listening. The listener rates have gone through the roof in the last couple of weeks. And of course, listen to some messages from our sponsors. And if you're interested, of course, www.patreon.com/Colombia Calling, and you can support us there. But thank you all. That's us this week. Bye-bye.